Did you know a quiet woman once challenged an entire society simply by opening a classroom for forgotten girls? In a world that denied women education, her faith turned books, prayer, and courage into a revolution of grace. She faced loss, resistance, and danger, yet her mission transformed generations. This is the story of Saint Rose Venerini. Before beginning, drop an Amen in the comments, like this video, and subscribe for more stories of the saints. Don't forget to share it so others may discover this story and be inspired to live holier lives. Chapter 1. The world she entered and the childhood that shaped her. In 17th century Italy, society was carefully layered and opportunities were not equally shared. Women, especially, were often confined to the home with little access to formal education. Their roles were defined early, and their voices rarely reached beyond family walls. It was a world where intellect in women was not encouraged, and learning was considered unnecessary for their place in society's rigid structure. Amid this social order, the faith of ordinary people remained sincere yet often poorly formed. Many women grew up with devotion in their hearts, but lacked a clear understanding of the teachings of the Church. Prayers were memorized, traditions followed, yet deeper catechesis was missing. This spiritual gap quietly shaped generations, leaving many souls longing for guidance they did not know how to seek. Education, in those days, rested mainly in the hands of the Church and within the family. Priests instructed the faithful, while parents passed on what they themselves had received. Yet without proper formation, this chain weakened over time. For girls especially, learning rarely extended beyond household skills. The idea that women could be formed intellectually and spiritually was not yet fully embraced. It was into this world that Rose Venerini was born on the 9th of February, 1656, in the quiet town of Viterbo. Surrounded by ancient walls and a deeply rooted Catholic culture, her early years were marked by both the beauty and the limitations of her time. God, in his providence, had chosen this place and moment for a soul destined to bring light where there was little. Rose's family played a vital role in shaping her path. Her father, a respected physician, was known not only for his knowledge but also for his integrity. Her mother came from a noble lineage, carrying with her a strong sense of dignity and faith. Together, they created a home where discipline, education, and devotion were woven into daily life, nurturing both the mind and the soul. From a very young age, something extraordinary stirred within Rose. At just 7 years old, she made a private vow to dedicate her life entirely to God. It was a quiet promise, hidden from the world, yet deeply rooted in sincerity. Even then, her heart was already learning to listen, to recognize a voice that would guide her far beyond what she could yet imagine. Her childhood unfolded in an atmosphere of prayer, order, and growing love for God. She learned not only through books, but through the rhythm of a life centered on faith. Discipline shaped her character, while devotion softened her heart. In these early years, unseen by many, God was preparing Rose Venerini for a mission that would one day transform countless lives. Chapter 2. Early vocation and the trials within her family. As Rose grew into adulthood, her heart steadily leaned toward a life fully given to God. The quiet promise she had made as a child began to take deeper root. She was drawn to prayer, to silence, to a life set apart. Those around her could see her seriousness, her inward focus, and her desire for something beyond the ordinary path expected of most women. Yet life, in its unpredictability, soon interrupted the direction she seemed to be taking. The sudden death of her fiancé marked a turning point she had not foreseen. What might have become a life of marriage was taken away in an instant. In her grief, Rose did not turn away from God, but instead began to seek him more earnestly, searching for meaning within her loss. Desiring to belong entirely to the Lord, she entered the Dominican monastery of St. Catherine. Within its walls, she tasted the beauty of contemplative life days, shaped by silence, prayer, and meditation. It was here that she deepened her interior life, learning to listen more attentively to God's voice. For a time, it seemed she had found the place where her vocation would unfold. However, God's plans were not confined within those cloistered walls. After the death of her father, Rose was called to return home to care for her mother. Obedience led her away from the monastery and back into the world she had hoped to leave behind. What appeared to be a setback was, in truth, another step in God's hidden design for her life. Sorrow did not end there. One by one, members of her family were taken from her father, her brother, and soon after, her mother. Each loss deepened the silence around her. The home that once held warmth and life became a place marked by absence. Rose found herself standing in the midst of grief, with little left to anchor her except her faith. In those years, she came to know a profound interior loneliness. The dreams she once held had been stripped away, and the path ahead was unclear. Yet even in this darkness, she did not lose her trust in God. Instead, she remained faithful in prayer, allowing her suffering to become a place of encounter, a quiet space where God could speak more deeply to her heart. Through these trials, Rose was slowly being prepared for something greater than she could yet understand. Her suffering purified her desires, freeing her from attachments and expectations. What remained was a heart ready to follow God wherever He would lead. In time, she would recognize that her vocation was not to withdraw from the world, but to transform it through love, truth, and faithful service. Chapter 3. Discovering her mission in education. In the year 1684, within the quiet walls of her home, Rose Venerini began a simple yet profound initiative. She invited women from her neighborhood to gather and pray the rosary together. These moments were humble, marked by sincerity and devotion. What seemed like a small act of piety would soon become the seed of a mission that would reshape her entire life. As these gatherings continued, Rose began to notice something that troubled her deeply. The women who came were faithful and willing, yet many lacked even the most basic understanding of their faith. They recited prayers without fully grasping their meaning. Their love for God was real, but it was not nourished by knowledge. This realization stirred a quiet urgency within her heart. Looking more closely, she recognized that the issue went beyond simple ignorance. There existed a deeper poverty, intellectual, moral, and spiritual. These women had been left without the tools needed to grow in virtue and understanding. Their lives reflected the limitations imposed by a society that had not invested in their formation. Rose saw clearly that this was not just a personal concern, but a widespread condition. In prayer and reflection, a conviction began to take shape within her. Education was not merely useful, it was essential. If hearts were to be transformed, minds had to be formed. She understood that true renewal in society could not happen without first addressing this hidden need. Teaching, then, was not simply an act of instruction, but a work of mercy, a path toward restoring dignity and truth. At the same time, Rose came to see more clearly the vital role of women within both the family and the life of faith. Women were the first educators of children, the ones who shaped conscience, prayer, and daily habits. If they were strengthened in knowledge and virtue, entire generations could be transformed. This insight gave her mission a deeper sense of purpose. With growing clarity, she realized that her path was not to withdraw into a cloistered life, but to remain in the world and serve where the need was greatest. The contemplative life she once desired gave way to an active calling. It was not a rejection of prayer, but an expansion of it, bringing God's presence into the daily lives of others through teaching and accompaniment. From that moment on, Rose embraced her mission with determination. She would dedicate herself to forming women who could live their faith with understanding and strength. Her goal was not only to teach, but to guide souls toward maturity in Christ. What began as a simple prayer gathering had now become a clear and life-giving vocation, one that would soon bear fruit far beyond her expectations. Chapter 4. Founding the First School and a Bold New Beginning. On the 30th of August, 1685, in the town of Viterbo, Rose Venerini took a courageous step that would quietly transform the course of history. After years of prayer and discernment, she opened her first school for girls. It was a simple beginning, without grandeur, yet filled with faith. In that moment, her hidden calling became visible, and a new path of service to God began to unfold. Rose did not embark on this mission alone. At her side were two faithful companions, Gerolama Coluzelli and Porzia Bacci, women who shared her conviction and courage. Together, they formed a small community rooted in trust and unity. Their collaboration reflected something deeply Christian, that God's work is often carried forward not by one person alone, but through hearts joined in a common purpose and sustained by grace. The doors of their school were opened especially to those who had been overlooked, the poor, the forgotten, the young girls who had no opportunity to learn. Education was offered freely, without expectation of reward. Rose believed deeply that every human person carried dignity given by God, and that no one should be denied the chance to grow in knowledge, faith, and self-worth simply because of their social condition. Inside the classroom, the lessons given were rich and meaningful. The girls were taught to read and write, but also to understand the truths of the Catholic faith. They learned prayers, moral values, and how to live as faithful Christians in daily life. Practical skills were also included, preparing them for their future roles. In this way, education became not only intellectual formation, but a preparation for life itself. What made Rose's work truly remarkable was her vision of integral formation. She did not seek only to fill minds with information, but to shape hearts and souls according to the gospel. She believed that true education must lead a person closer to God, forming conscience, strengthening virtue, and nurturing a sense of purpose. Her approach reflected a deep understanding that faith and reason must walk together in harmony. At that time, such an initiative was unprecedented. A school open to girls, led by women, and focused on both education and faith, challenged long-standing assumptions in society. Yet, precisely because it was new, it became a sign of hope. What began in Viterbo would later be recognized as the first public model of education for girls in Italy, opening a door that had long remained closed. Gradually, the fruits of this work became impossible to ignore. Families saw changes in their daughters' greater confidence, deeper faith, and stronger moral character. Both civil authorities and leaders within the church began to take notice. What had once seemed unusual was now recognized as a blessing. Through quiet perseverance, Rose's mission gained acceptance, becoming a living testimony that God's work, when faithful, will always bear lasting fruit. Chapter 5. Trials, Opposition, and Perseverance. As Rose Venirini's schools slowly began to grow, resistance followed close behind. In a society where women were rarely entrusted with public roles, the image of a woman teaching openly was unsettling. Many could not accept it. To them, it seemed improper, even dangerous. What Rose had begun in humility was now confronting deeply rooted cultural expectations that had remained unquestioned for generations. Opposition did not come only from society, but also from within the church itself. Some clergy believed that teaching the catechism was a responsibility reserved exclusively for priests. They feared that allowing laywomen to instruct others might blur sacred boundaries. Though not all shared this view, the criticism was real. Rose found herself misunderstood, even by those who were meant to guide and protect the faith she loved. Her educational methods also raised suspicion. She was not simply teaching girls to memorize prayers, but encouraging them to understand, to think, and to grow in virtue. For many, this approach seemed unnecessary. Why educate girls so deeply when their lives would remain within the home? Such questions revealed a deeper resistance not just to her work, but to the dignity and potential of the women she served. At times, this resistance turned harsh. Words of criticism were joined by acts of hostility. There were moments when schools were threatened and even attacked. Fear entered the daily lives of those involved in the mission. What Rose had built with care now stood vulnerable. Yet these trials revealed something deeper. Her work was touching a truth strong enough to provoke opposition, a sign that real change was beginning. Her companions shared fully in these difficulties. Gerolama, Coluzelli, and Porzia Bacci, along with other collaborators, faced pressure, uncertainty, and danger. They had chosen a path that required courage, yet they remained faithful, supporting one another in both fear and hope. Their unity became a quiet witness, showing that when a mission is rooted in God, it can endure even under strain. In the midst of all this, Rose remained remarkably calm. She did not fight back with anger or attempt to defend herself through argument. Instead, she entrusted everything to God. Her strength came from prayer and from a deep interior certainty that she was following His will. She believed that truth does not need to force itself. It reveals itself through patience, fidelity, and love. Over time, the fruits of her work began to speak more clearly than any defense she could offer. The girls who attended her schools grew not only in knowledge, but in confidence, virtue, and faith. Families began to notice the transformation. Slowly, attitudes shifted. What had once been rejected started to be respected. Through perseverance, Rose's mission became a living testimony that faith, when lived faithfully, can gently but powerfully renew the world. Chapter 6. Her final years and a holy death. In the later years of her life, Rose Venerini witnessed the quiet expansion of the work God had entrusted to her. What began as a single school gradually spread throughout the region of Lazio. Each new foundation carried the same spirit: faithful teaching, patient formation, and deep trust in God. These schools became places where young women were not only educated, but gently transformed from within. Her mission soon extended beyond her hometown as she was invited to Montefiascone and the surrounding villages near Lake Bolsena. There, new schools were established, reaching communities that had long been without proper formation. The invitation itself was a sign that her work was being recognized. With humility and determination, Rose brought her vision to these places, planting seeds of faith and knowledge in fertile yet long neglected ground. During this time, her collaboration with Lucy Filippini deepened significantly. Lucy became not only a trusted companion but also a key figure in training teachers. Together, they formed women who could carry the mission forward with competence and devotion. This partnership ensured that the work would not depend on one person alone, but would continue to grow through a shared spirit and clear purpose. Rome, however, proved to be a greater challenge. For years, Rose longed to establish a school there, yet her efforts met repeated obstacles. Doors seemed to close, and progress was slow. Still, she did not abandon the call. With perseverance shaped by faith, she continued to try, trusting that if the work was of God, it would find its way in time. Her patience became a silent act of surrender. At last, her efforts bore fruit. A school was successfully opened in Rome, and in 1716, Pope Clement VI himself came to visit. Accompanied by several cardinals, he observed the work firsthand. What he saw moved him deeply. He recognized the value of her mission and gave it his approval. This moment marked a turning point, confirming before the wider church that her work was truly inspired. Through all these years, Rose lived a spirituality that united action and contemplation. Influenced by the spirit of Ignatius of Loyola, she understood that serving God in the world required a heart rooted in prayer. Her days were filled with teaching and responsibility, yet her strength flowed from silence, from the Eucharist, and from constant union with God's will. On the 7th of May 1728, in Rome, Rose Venirini's earthly journey came to an end. She died as she had lived quietly, faithfully, and surrendered to God. Her words reflected the depth of her trust. She desired only what God desired. In that final act of offering, her life became complete. What she left behind was not only a legacy of schools, but a living witness of love, shaped entirely by divine will. Chapter 7. Canonization, Veneration, and a Living Legacy. After the death of Rose Venerini in 1728, her reputation for holiness began to spread quietly but steadily. Those who had known her spoke of her wisdom, her patience, and her unwavering trust in God. Stories of her life were shared among families and communities, not as distant admiration, but as living testimony. Her memory remained close to the people, as if her presence had never truly left them. As devotion to her grew, many began to turn to her in prayer, seeking her intercession before God. Over time, accounts of favors received and extraordinary graces were reported. Some of these were recognized as miracles, signs that her mission continued beyond her earthly life. Through these events, the Church discerned not only the fruits of her work, but also the enduring power of her faith and holiness. The path toward official recognition took time, as the Church carefully examined her life and the signs attributed to her intercession. In 1952, she was beatified, a moment that affirmed her example as worthy of public veneration. This step was not merely a formal declaration, but an invitation for the faithful to look to her life as a model of trust, perseverance, and service shaped by God's will. Years later, the Church would proclaim what many had already come to believe in their hearts. In 2006, Pope Benedict XVI canonized Rose Venerini, declaring her a saint for the Universal Church. This recognition placed her among those whose lives shine as clear reflections of the gospel. Her mission, once small and local, was now offered as a gift to the entire world. The work she began did not end with her passing. The group of teachers she formed gradually developed into a religious congregation known as the Maestra P. Venerini. Rooted in her vision, they continued the mission of educating young women in both faith and knowledge. Through their dedication, her spirit remained alive, carried forward by those who shared her calling and commitment. Over time, this congregation extended its presence far beyond Italy. Schools and communities were established across Europe, and later in the United States and other parts of the world. Wherever they went, they brought with them the same vision, education as a path to dignity, faith as the foundation of life, and service as an expression of love. Her mission crossed borders, cultures, and generations. Today, the legacy of Rose Venerini continues to speak with quiet strength. She is remembered not only as a pioneer in education, but as a witness to the dignity of every human person, especially women. Through her life, the Church is reminded that true education forms both mind and soul. Her story endures as a gentle yet powerful call to transform the world through truth, faith, and love. Chapter 8. A Prayer to Saint Rose Venerini. O Rose Venerini, faithful servant of God's holy will, you who followed his path with unwavering trust, even in suffering, we come before you with humble hearts. Teach us to surrender our plans as you did, and to believe that God's ways are always greater than our own, even when we do not fully understand his purpose in life. Help us, dear Saint Rose, to listen attentively to the voice of God in our daily lives. In the noise and distractions of the world, guide us to recognize His gentle call. May we learn to pause, to pray, and to discern His will with clarity and courage, trusting that He continues to speak to every heart that seeks Him with sincerity and faith. Grant us a deep love for truth and a desire for knowledge that leads us closer to God. As you dedicated your life to education, inspire us to seek wisdom not for pride, but for service. May our minds be enlightened and our hearts be formed, so that all we learn may help us grow in virtue and in our relationship with Christ. Bless all those who dedicate their lives to teaching and forming others. Strengthen educators in their mission, that they may guide with patience, wisdom, and compassion. Through your intercession, may their work bear fruit in the lives of those they serve, helping each person discover their dignity and purpose as beloved children of God. Watch over families, especially parents, who carry the sacred responsibility of raising their children in faith. Help them to be examples of love, truth, and perseverance. May their homes become places of prayer and learning, where faith is lived daily and passed on with care, shaping future generations rooted in the love of Christ. In times of trial and difficulty, stand beside us and give us strength. When we feel discouraged or uncertain, remind us of your perseverance and trust in God. Help us to remain faithful even when the path is difficult, believing that every challenge can become a step closer to holiness when united with God's grace. Finally, O Saint Rose, guide us to become instruments of God's light in the world. May our lives reflect the gospel through acts of love, truth, and service. Help us to bring hope where there is darkness and faith where there is doubt. Through your intercession, may we walk always in God's will. Amen.